My friends and I had been planning a camping trip for months. The idea was to get away from the city's chaos and reconnect with nature. After researching online and chatting with a few seasoned campers, we picked a spot deep in the forest, far from any trails or known campsites. It was perfect, pristine, untouched, and remote. We arrived early Friday afternoon. The sun filtered through the dense canopy, casting dappled light on the forest floor. The air was crisp and carried the faint, earthy scent of moss and pine. By the time we set up camp near a small clearing by a tranquil lake, the day felt like it had already been a success. The water was so clear you could see the rocks at the bottom. It seemed like the perfect place to unwind. As the sky deepened into twilight, we sat around the campfire, telling stories and roasting marshmallows. The sound of the crackling fire mixed with the occasional chirp of crickets created a soothing ambiance. That's when I noticed it, movement at the edge of the woods. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The flickering firelight could easily make shadows dance, but as I focused, I saw him, a man, standing unnervingly still among the trees. "Do you see that?" I whispered to Sarah, nudging her. She followed my gaze, squinting into the darkness. "I don't see anything," she said, shrugging. "Probably just a hiker or a hunter." "Maybe," I muttered, though my gut told me otherwise. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound, and as the minutes passed, he seemed to vanish into the shadows. I didn't mention it again, not wanting to spook the others, but my mind kept going back to that strange, motionless figure. The next morning, I woke early and decided to take a walk by the lake. The water was like glass, reflecting the surrounding forest perfectly. It was peaceful, almost magical, but as I wandered along the shore, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I spun around, convinced someone was behind me, but the path was empty. The forest, usually alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves, had gone eerily silent. I quickened my pace back to camp, chalking up the feeling to nerves. Still, the sense of being watched lingered. Later that day, Jake suggested we explore deeper into the woods. Armed with a map and a sense of adventure, we set off. About an hour into the hike, we stumbled upon something unsettling, a small, dilapidated cabin hidden among the trees. The windows were shattered and the door hung ajar. Jake, ever the brave one, decided to peek inside. "It's just old junk," he called out. But as we stood there, a feeling of being watched washed over me. It wasn't paranoia, it was palpable. The silence around us seemed to grow heavier, like the forest itself was holding its breath. "I think we should head back," I said, my voice shaky. The others agreed, and we made our way back to camp, an unspoken tension settling over us. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the mood at the campfire was subdued. The laughter and easy conversation from the night before were replaced with nervous glances into the woods. I noticed even Sarah, who usually dismissed my fears, seemed quieter than usual. Then we heard it. A whistle. It was faint, high-pitched and haunting. It came from somewhere deep in the forest, far enough to be faint but close enough to be deliberate. "Who's out there?" Jake shouted, standing up. There was no response. The whistle came again, closer this time. My heart raced as we all stared into the dark, trying to see what, or who, was out there. That night, sleep was impossible. Around 2 a.m., I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside my tent. They were slow and deliberate, crunching the leaves underfoot. My breath hitched as I strained to listen. "Sarah?" I whispered. No response. Gathering every ounce of courage, I unzipped the tent flap just enough to peer outside. There he was, the man from the woods. He stood just beyond the fire's dying embers, his face partially obscured by the shadows. He raised a hand and waved. It was slow and deliberate, the kind of gesture meant to unnerve rather than greet. My heart pounded as I scrambled back inside the tent, shaking Jake awake. By the time we all got outside, he was gone. His footprints, though, were clear in the dirt near the fire pit, proof that I hadn't been dreaming. The next morning, we decided to pack up and leave. As we dismantled the tents, Jake called out, "Guys, come look at this." In the dirt surrounding our campsite were footprints. They were large and deep, circling the tents in a way that made it clear someone had been watching us. The drive back to the city was tense. None of us spoke much, each lost in our thoughts. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had narrowly escaped something terrible. I kept looking out the car window, half expecting to see that man standing by the roadside. A week later, curiosity got the better of me, and I started researching the area. That's when I found an article that made my blood run cold. The article described a man who had gone missing months ago while camping in those very woods. He was last seen by another group of campers who claimed he had been acting strangely before vanishing without a trace. There was no explanation for his disappearance, but there were rumors, whispers of something or someone lurking in the woods. To this day, I don't know who or what we encountered, but every so often I wake up in the middle of the night, haunted by the image of that man in the shadows, his eerie wave etched into my memory. Was he trying to warn us, or was he waiting for the right moment to strike? All I know is, I'll never set foot in those woods again.